Welcome to this local buy information session and vendor panel training. Let's start off with some introductions. My name is Emma Peters. I'm the Head of Engagement for Local Buy. I also look after a number of councils in the north of Queensland and in the Northern Territory. My other colleagues that sit within the engagement team are Jeremy and Liz, who work in the southern part of Queensland, and Audrey, who is based in the Cairns region, who joins me in looking after councils and other buyers in the north. Now, this presentation this morning is going to cover who Local Buy is and what we do. And after we've gone through those slides, we're going to actually pop into VendorPanel, and I'm going to show you how you can utilize VendorPanel for your procurement. So who is Local Buy? We are a wholly owned subsidiary of the Local Government Association of Queensland. Now, Local Buy was established way back in 2001 to assist councils streamline procurement. And I'm going to explain to you in just a moment why they need assistance with streamlining procurement. Local Buy is a profit for purpose organisation. Any surplus that we make over and above our operating costs are returned to the LGAQ, who use those funds to keep the membership fees of the association low and also provide great services and advocacy on behalf of the industry. Now, hereby commences the lecture into the local government regulations. No, I'm only joking. I wouldn't do that to you. I'm going to do a very light touch in terms of explaining what councils need to do specifically when they go out to purchase. And I know that we have some organisations online today that are not necessarily local government based, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, the Queensland default procurement rules say that if councils are going out to purchase things on behalf of their ratepayers, they have to obtain 3 written quotes if they're going out to purchase things between $15,000 and $200,000, excluding GST. If they are going out to procure goods and services over $200,000, they must perform a full and open market tender. Now, full and open market tenders are quite long and complex to do, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit later in the presentation. Now, it's important to note that for local government purchasing, that $200,000 threshold is actually accumulative through the life of a contract or within a financial year for similar goods and services with a single supplier. The cost of doing business is so much so these days that $200,000 is not hard to achieve. And I have, because I know we are joined by some Northern Territory councils, popped up here just briefly the Northern Territory thresholds, which is slightly different from Queensland, and that tendering comes in at a lower level. So 150,000 for the Northern Territory is that tendering threshold. Now, as I alluded to before, tendering is a really long and arduous process. First of all, through a tender process, you can't buy anything quickly because that tender has to be open for a full 21 days. The preparation of tender documents and the contract that you're going to engage the supplier with is a long process too. You may need to engage external lawyers to help you write those contracts, which is not only time consuming, but expensive for council and for our buyers too. You have to evaluate every single tender that comes in, very time consuming, and there is a risk that the preferred tenderer could be from outside your council region. Now, we know that local content is extremely important, specifically within local government, and Local Buy enables you to make sure that you are inviting local buy suppliers that are based within your region only. And I'll explain how we do that in a moment. We've done some averages on how much it costs to put a tender together, to issue that tender and evaluate it. And it's about $20,000 per tender to put together and about $5,000 for suppliers to respond. Important to note that that supplier may not win that work, even though they've had to respond to that particular tender. So why would a council or another entity use a local buy arrangement? Well, we've done all the hard work for you. So we have formed 58 pre-qualified supplier arrangements tailored to local government needs, but also tailored to the other buyers who can utilise local buy. And we'll talk about who they are in just a moment. So councils can procure through a local buy arrangement, directly requesting quotes from suppliers rather than having to do tenders, regardless of the cost of that particular project. The local buy arrangements have got pre-agreed terms and conditions. We've done the contract piece for you, and I will show you where you can find those contracts within the vendor panel system in just a moment. For some arrangements, we've even established pricing for you that the suppliers have agreed to, and they cannot charge you any more than that agreed pricing that sits within the local buy environment. So essentially, we reduce the time and resources in going out to market to purchase goods and services on behalf of your organisation. $950 million last year in the financial year FY23-24 was procured through local buy arrangements, which is no small amount, as I'm sure you can agree. I'm going to talk a little bit about vendor panel now. Local buy uses an online procurement system, and that online procurement system is called vendor panel. This system enables you as a buyer to issue requests for quote for projects through the system. And it's also a wonderful tool for storing all of the licensing and compliance documentation that suppliers provide to local buy when they become a local buy pre-qualified supplier. Now, you don't have to use vendor panel when you're engaging a local buy supplier. You can go really old school and use emails. But what I'm going to demonstrate to you throughout this particular presentation is how vendor panel is a more streamlined and efficient way to be engaging local buy suppliers. So the benefits of vendor panel are you can use the information within vendor panel to make a short list of suppliers using our supplier matrix. Some of our arrangements have over 500 suppliers on them, and we don't recommend that you go out and ask for a quote from 500 suppliers in one go. The supplier matrix is an Excel spreadsheet that enables you to drill down the category of that particular item that you're going to buy, and even selecting regionally which area in which you wish to procure. And I will go through how we do that in the system in a moment. It reduces the risk of fraud because you cannot see any of the responses that are coming in for that particular quote until the quote is closed. There are predetermined open and close dates, remembering that this is not a tender, this is a request for quote. So you do not have to go out for the full 21 days. There is an online portal for questions and answers. Again, really important for you to make sure that you're not giving any one supplier more information than another. And that can sometimes inadvertently happen if you're having a chat on the phone to Bob and not giving Jim the same information on that particular request for quote. The online portal enables the supplier to post a question, and you can respond to that within the portal, deciding if you would like everybody to see that question and answer. So all of the suppliers are getting the same information. There is, of course, the ability to evaluate your requests for quote within the system and award through the vendor panel technology. And it's great for record keeping. When the auditor comes to audit your organization and they say, please show me what you did for this particular procurement activity, you can pull up your vendor panel quotes and say, this is who I sent this quote to, and it will name all of the suppliers. This is what I sent them, so the documentation that you sent out asking for that quote, the responses from those suppliers, how you evaluated and awarded all sits within the technology, which makes it super easy for you if anyone wants to see the process that you went through when you purchased that particular goods or services. And it's also a fantastic research tool. You can have a look to see which suppliers are in your area. You can check their insurances and pricing if that particular contract has pricing attached to it, and allowing you to keep the money within the region if local content is important to your organization, to keep that quote within your local region. It also allows you to monitor your requests for quote. Now, we know we did some research into the statistics. It's becoming harder and harder to actually get suppliers to respond to quotes. Vendor panel allows you to see which suppliers have actually read that quote and gives them an option to say, yes, I'm going to respond to this quote, or no, I don't want to take part in this particular quote. They may not be resourced enough to do that for you. That gives you some insight into the progress of the quote rather than opening up the tender box at the end of the 21 days to find there's nothing in it. If that is going to happen and all of the suppliers have declined that quote, you know you have a problem way before the quote closes, and then you can take steps to action that. So there are 3 different ways to go through vendor panel depending on the level of technology that you have. A request for quote for our upgraded councils who have next gen capability. They have options to use a full and open tender if you wish to do so, and the public marketplace. Please be mindful, however, the public marketplace is just a business directory. Those suppliers within marketplace are not pre-qualified, so be very careful when utilising the public marketplace. Now, local buy fees. How do we charge companies, and how does that all work? There is no charge for our buyers to utilise local buy. The charges are made to the suppliers who pay a small annual fee to be part of local buy and a small contract management fee based on the level of business that they do through local buy pre-qualified supplier arrangements. That averages out across all of our 58 arrangements to 1%. But many of our suppliers report back that that 1% pales into insignificance compared to the cost of having to respond to tenders all of the time, which would happen if they were not being utilised within the local buy environment. So as I alluded to before, local content is super important for our local government clients, both in the Northern Territory and also here in Queensland. Now, local buy arrangements are open once a quarter for new suppliers to come on. And the way that we invite new suppliers to come on is that we run a tender saying local buy is out to market at the moment for library resources. And anyone who would like to supply library resources is invited to respond to that tender. Those suppliers are evaluated on their capabilities, their financial sustainability. We also ask for all of their insurance documentation. If they are providing design services, we ask for professional indemnity insurance, and all of that information is stored within the vendor panel system. So we're really happy to educate suppliers who would benefit from being pre-qualified, and we would welcome you to tell us who you would like to see on a local buy pre-qualified supplier arrangement. My team are delighted to work on supplier engagement sessions in your region, whether they're face-to-face, like Audrey and I did last week up in Cooktown. We ran a supplier engagement session at the PCYC, or we can do them online. In fact, we do have an information session taking place at 2 o'clock this afternoon, or 1 o'clock maybe this afternoon, that Audrey is running. It's an online session for any supplier that's interested in hearing more about the benefits of local buy. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have suppliers that you think could benefit from being involved. A quick arrangements update before we pop into vendor panel. Local Buy have recently released and have up and running already 3 new civil arrangements. They are general civil and road construction and resurfacing, that's LB 314, water and sewerage infrastructure, sorry, that was 313, water and sewerage infrastructure, which is 314, and water and sewerage products like head walls and culverts and pipes and pumps sits under 316. We also have a new temporary recruitment and managed service provider arrangement for all your human resources needs, and 2 brand new arrangements. We've always been able to assist our buyers go and resurface a road or build a bridge or a tunnel under our civil arrangement, but we couldn't actually help you build a building. So now we can. Our 2 new construction arrangements cover commercial fit out and asbestos. Demolition is under 1, that's the commercial arrangement, and then a separate arrangement for residential, which does include modular buildings. And on the 1st of August, we went out to market through a tender process to form a brand new arrangement to look after library resources. That came out on the 1st of August and will be closing at the end of the month. So our fully funded procurement technology, which I alluded to before, 66 of the 77 councils in Queensland have access to that, and it's a local buy funded technology, completely funded. It's free of charge for all councils to use. And it's essentially, apart from an upgraded vendor panel, which allows councils to issue their own tenders and form their own pre-qualified supplier arrangements and access the public marketplace, it has what's called a hub, which has got lots of policy guides and how to procure to guide your staff on what they need to be doing to comply with legislation. It also has an analytics section which enables your finance team and economic development to audit spend and drive more local content within your regions. Now, the last couple of slides before we pop into the vendor panel environment. We just had our local buy conference in Brisbane at the beginning of August, which was absolutely fantastic. So sorry if you missed out. If you did come along, we hope you enjoyed it. I'm putting together a fleet managers forum, which is taking place in Townsville on the 31st of October. It's free of charge. It's a 1-day mini conference, a forum to invite all the fleet professionals from not just local government, but other entities who can utilise local buy to come along to hear from organisations such as TMR about conditional registrations, the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. We're going to be talking about supply chain challenges. So if you're interested in that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Before we pop into the vendor panel environment, I'm just going to talk about some other organisations that can access local buy. So it's not just for local government. State and federal government departments can access local buy if they would like to do so. Not-for-profits and charities, educational organisations and government-owned corporations. So some of the water boards in Australia, in Queensland are really good users of local buy. Some of the port authorities are also starting to access local buy, and we have lots of not-for-profits and charities already using local buy. So this last slide is all about feedback. So I'm going to pop out of this particular presentation and I'm going to go into the vendor panel environment. So Audrey, hopefully you can confirm to me that you can now see my screen. If you can come back.
Absolutely.
And can you see vendor panel, Audrey?
Yes, I can.
Yay. Okay, that's wonderful. So now I'm going to start looking this way at my other screen for you. So apologies, you're going to get my side profile. This is vendor panel. Don't panic. Your vendor panel will not look as complicated as this vendor panel because I have administrator rights. However, I'm going to walk you through some really important places that you will need to go that are showing on my screen. So down here, and I might just zoom in a little bit more so it's bigger on your screen. Down here, you have supplier lists. Now, this is where you go to see all the local buy arrangements that are available to you. So if you click here on local buy lists, You can see, as I referred to before, all of the arrangements we have available for you to access. Everything from asset management services all the way down to LB316, which is water, sewerage and stormwater products. So, if you would like to find out a little bit more information about one of our arrangements, you can click on the arrangement itself, and I'm going to choose, for very good reason, engineering and environmental consulting, because that's what we're going out to purchase today. This tells me the contract number, which is LB312, when it's going to expire, the categories within that particular arrangement, and the local by category manager who is responsible for that particular arrangement. Now, engineering is looked after by our category manager, Debbie Spann. If you have any technical questions about that particular contract, Debbie is your go-to person and her contact details are here. And these are all the categories that sit within that particular arrangement. So I'm going to close that screen. Now, as I referred to before, some of our arrangements have lots and lots of suppliers on them. Engineering Environmental Consulting has 585 active suppliers on the list, which is huge. So what you would probably like to do is to drill down to form a short list of suppliers that you're going to invite for your particular quote. And the way you do that is using the supplier matrix, which is stored in this next line of blue bubbles, which is the document portal. So if I click here, it tells me which documents are attached to that particular arrangement. The specification that the suppliers responded to when they responded to the tender to become a local buy supplier. It has a vendor panel buyer guide. It's got the general conditions of contract. Now, the general conditions of contract is the contract between local buy and the supplier. The purchaser conditions of contract is the contract that you will be using to engage that supplier when you engage them through a local buy arrangement. They're in there, feel free to pop in and have a read of them. And then finally, the supplier matrix. Now, in some instances, a supplier may have departures to those conditions of contract, and they are also shown within VendorPanel, so you can have a look at them to see what those departures have been from our standard terms and conditions. And I'll show you in a second where you can find those. So I'm going to click here on this active supplier list, which will pull up for me all of the suppliers that are on that particular arrangement. Now I'm going to pick on AECOM here, very large multinational engineering consultancy group. Gives you some information about AECOM. And the reason I've chosen this particular supplier is because they have marked up purchaser conditions of contract and general conditions of contract for you to see. What else you can see within this tab is their professional indemnity insurance certificate, their public liability and their workers' compensation. So you don't have to go back out and ask for that organisation to provide those documents. They're sitting here within VendorPanel for you to use. It also shows that this business is ISO accredited and they have submitted their modern slavery statement, which is also attached to VendorPanel. Now, interestingly, we are in the process of working to improve the badging for local buy suppliers. So that badging, we're going to be working with a third-party organisation to improve the badging, which will enable you to easily sort for Indigenous-owned businesses, community-based businesses or social enterprises to enable you to drill down a little further in when you're inviting suppliers to quote. What you will also see here is the rate card. So I referred to this in my initial part of the presentation, is that local buy have predetermined maximum rates that a supplier can charge you when you're engaging them through a local buy arrangement. And these are also shown here within the VendorPanel system, and you can download that rate card. And this rate card is updated annually. So it will also show you the categories that that supplier has been engaged under and where they have office locations here. and where they're happy to work down here. So I'm going to close this screen down now and come out of here, and I'm going to pop into the category matrix. So what we're going to go out and purchase today, if you don't mind, is some electrical engineering services, and we're going to be looking at the Townsville region because that's where I'm based. I'm here in Townsville today. We're going to be forming a short list of suppliers to invite for some electrical engineering in Townsville. So I'm going to open up the supplier matrix, which will actually open up an Excel spreadsheet, which is opened up on my other screen. So bear with me while I pull this over here. So this is the category matrix. Now this is your one source of truth for going in to find your suppliers that you're going to invite to quote. So this spreadsheet has got all 500 of the suppliers on there, but it's also got the categories of engineering. And if I zoom across this way, it's got the environmental categories broken out from it. But as I said before, I've changed my mind. We're actually going to go for geotechnical. So I'm going to filter yes on geotechnical engineering. So that's filtered out now and given me 33 suppliers that could do geotechnical engineering. But I want a shorter list than that. So I'm going to choose the northern region, which is here in the Townsville region, and I'm going to click who has an actual office location here in Townsville, and that's actually taken it down to a short list of 9 organisations. That's much better than 585. We know that these particular suppliers have an office here in Townsville, and they have been pre-qualified under that geotechnical engineering banner. So now what I would normally do if I was going out to purchase is I would pick up this matrix and I'd shove that onto my other screen so I have that ready for when we're going to go out to quote, which is exactly what we're going to do now. So we're going to go back to the home page and we're going to go up here to my requests. We're going to create a new request. Now, this is the request wizard, and VendorPanel will step you through the whole way of you actually putting this request for quote out, naming it, selecting suppliers, what you'd like to purchase, any particular questions, any files that you'd like to attach, the budget, how long you're going to have it open for, and saving and posting to suppliers. So let's hope my typing is on point today. Geotechnical engineering services, Townsville. That's what I'm going to call it. If you use reference numbers, you can pop your reference number in here. I'm not going to use a reference number today, and I'm going to save and continue. Now I'm going to use a local by list. And because I've already done my research up front, I know the list I'm going to use is engineering services, and I'm going to tick geotechnical. And I'm going to slide down to the bottom and use these categories. Now, what's going to happen on the next screen is I'm going to reselect that I want to use engineering, and the next one that pops up will be all of those suppliers who have been pre-qualified for geotechnical engineering, which I do not want to invite all of them. So I'm going to choose the ones that are on my supplier matrix on my other screen. There are a number of ways that you can filter. You can actually filter here for social enterprises, Indigenous identified. If you're really keen on having organisations that have ISO accreditation, you can click on that there. So there are a number of badges and they will bring up those particular suppliers at the front, at the top here. You can also filter geographically. So you could say, show me all of the suppliers within 50 kilometres of your office location, which is mine is set to the suburb where I am here in Anoomba in Townsville. However, I do have my supplier matrix, so I am going to choose just 3 for the purposes of this demonstration, organisations who are pre-qualified for geotechnical that have office locations here in Townsville. And I'm literally just typing them from this list. I'm ticking on them, and I have my 3 suppliers selected, so I'm going to use these suppliers. Now we're coming into the request overview. This is where you're telling the supplier what you're going out to purchase. For this particular procurement activity, I have a request for quote template with a specification and scope of works already attached to it. So I just have one document that I need to attach for this particular quote. So I'm not going to put anything else in this box. I'm going to say see attached, oh, if I could type, specification, and that's all I'm going to put. If you were going out to buy 4 reams of paper, you might just type in this box, please quote to provide 4 reams of paper delivered to my organisation. It would be as simple as that. Depending on the complexity of the project, depends on how much information you like to put in this particular area. You can put a further background information or compatibility requirements or nice to haves, warranties, service level agreement information in here too, depending on what you're going out to purchase. I'm going to save and continue. So we are already halfway through our request for quote already. Now this section I think is really good. This enables you to ask any particular questions that you don't want buried in the response when you're going out to quote. So for this particular project, I'm going to pretend that the timeline on this one is really short. I need these suppliers to be able to finish this project by the mid-October. So if awarded by end of August, can your organisation complete this project before end of October? Now that's going to be put in as a mandatory question because I'm going to click yes, I want that to be a mandatory question, and I'm happy for the suppliers to respond in text. Depending on what your questions are, you could specify yes or no, money, numbers, or dates, or make your own response. And I'm going to add this question. So you could, if you wanted to, build up a little questionnaire for all of the suppliers to respond to, so that information is not buried within the response when they send it back to you. If you don't have any particular questions, you can just move past this screen by saving and continuing. Now here is where we would go and add our files. So if you have any particular files that you would like to add your specification or request for quote template, you would just press select files and go and grab them from wherever you've saved them within your computer system. So for smaller files under 15 megs, you can attach up to 50 files at one go. If they're large files like wiring diagrams or architectural documents that are over 150 megabytes, you can switch into large file mode. So we're going to just save and continue for the purposes of this demonstration. And we've nearly finished already. Do you require the suppliers to provide a total cost? Yes, I do. And the estimated value of this particular work, I think, is going to be between 50 and 100,000. That is hidden from the suppliers as a default. You may want to tell your supplier that you have $25,000 to $50,000. For example, if you had a grant to buy some play equipment and you only have $50,000, you could go out and show that you have $50,000 and you could say, please, Mr. Supplier, what can you give me in terms of play equipment for $50,000? So this part of VendorPanel allows you a little bit of flexibility on how you're going out to quote. More often than not, though, you're not going to be showing them the budget. You're going to be asking them to provide a price for those goods or services. So this one I think is going to cost $50,000. I'm going to pop that in the budgeted value. So that again will never be disclosed to suppliers. We're going to save and continue. So submission dates. Now remember I said that this was, we're pretending that this one is a rather short time scale. So the system defaults to you having this open for 2 weeks. So it's going to open today and it's going to close on the 5th of September. You can change that depending on the complexity of your particular project. If you're going out to buy a motor vehicle and you are approaching your local dealership for one singular vehicle, I would say you could give them 1 week to respond. You are well within your rights to do that. This is an RFQ, not a full and open tender. So you could say, yes, I'm only going to have that out there for 1 week. If it's a really complex project that requires mandatory site visits and things like that, then I would definitely go out for longer. You can have this open for 4 weeks if you want to, or 6 weeks if it's a really, really huge complex project. Please be mindful though that the longer that you give the suppliers to respond, then you're going to get much more accurate quotes that are going to end up with far less variations. If suppliers are rushing to get pricing in when they haven't been able to necessarily get subcontractor pricing and things like that, that price that they supply you isn't going to be as accurate. So do try to give them as long as you can. I know that the engineering consultants always beg for more time to respond to quotes because they're so very, very busy at the moment. So I'm going to actually pop this out for 2 weeks. And I'm going to close it at 2 p.m. so I can pop in that afternoon and have a look at my responses. Now, the evaluation period, you can choose here how long you want to have to evaluate before the system starts saying, please, can you finalise this request? It also gives your suppliers an idea of how quickly they're going to get a yes or a no. So I'm going to do this evaluation really quickly because we have a deadline of the end of October for this particular project to be completed. If you know you have to go and get approval or you have to wait for your next council meeting for approval, you may want to push that out for 4 or 6 weeks so the suppliers know they're not going to get a quick response. So we're pretty much ready to save and post out to our suppliers. We just need to do another couple of things. First of all, we need to decide how are we going to evaluate this request for quote. So that you can do that in 2 ways. You can do a quick select. If you were going out to buy 4 reams of paper and the only thing that you cared about was cost, you could do a quick select, which is essentially yes to this supplier, no to all of the others. However, most often than not, your project that you're going out for may be more complex and you might want to set up a supplier matrix, which means you can choose the criteria and weightings of what you're going to be evaluating that under. You can set that up, including cost within that, and the system will actually do all these fancy calculations and come up with the preferred supplier with a score. We're not going to go into that in detail today because we don't have time to do so. However, I will show you that VendorPanel has some awesome online videos that will help you with that, or you can reach out to me offline and I'm happy to go through it with you. So the supplier cut-off period. Now, remember I said to you back in my presentation that you can be anonymous and we're going to be anonymous for this quote. But if suppliers have particular questions they want to ask you, they can do it through the question and answer portal. Now, you can set a cut-off period to stop those questions and answers up to not have one at all. They can keep asking questions right up until it closes, or you can cut it off a number of days before the quote actually finishes. So I'm going to set mine to be 1 day before, and I'm going to remain anonymous. So if that supplier has any questions or queries, they have to post them in the VendorPanel environment. Now, please don't let me post this request, people, because this is the live system, and I don't want those suppliers to think I'm actually going out for engineering consulting services, because I'm not. But if you were ready to post, you would just post this request. Or you can save it as a draft, or even save it as a template if you're regularly going out for the same thing. So I'm going to save this as a draft, and it's going to appear on the front page of my VendorPanel. I'm going to close this here. You can see it's sitting here. And if I wanted to post it now, I could pop in there. and finish and actually post it out. Another great thing about VendorPanel compared to using email is if you have any addendums, which quite often happen, something might come up. One of the suppliers might ask a question, and you say, "Oh, actually, I do have another document that may help." You can go in and add an addendum and additional documentation anytime throughout that process by editing the quote. So once you've actually posted it, these three buttons here will enable you to edit that quote. You can go in and attach a new document and put a note in the system that all of the suppliers will be alerted that you have put an addendum into the system. If you were doing that via email, you would have to individually email all of those suppliers again, and there's no guarantees that that supplier would actually get that addendum. So it just gives you greater flexibility over when you're going out to request quotes. Now, up here, these are the awesome videos. So there are, as a buyer, as someone who has access to VendorPanel and able to issue requests for quote, you are able to go in and view any of these buyer-related videos, including evaluating and creating those evaluation matrix that I talked about earlier. Finalising your requests, how to edit, and how to answer those supplier questions. So before we shoot out of the system and move into the question and answers, the other thing that I'm going to show you is actually this is the live environment. I'm actually going to show you how VendorPanel enables you to have greater transparency over your requests for quotes as opposed to doing them via email. So I'm just going to scroll down here, and I had a look at one yesterday that was a good one to use, and it was for, was it this one? Yes, no, it wasn't that one. It was for Burdekinshire Council. Here we go, yes. So these are all some live ones. This is Burdekinshire Council. They were looking for some bitumen products, and I can click here on the statistics. Now this request for quote is still open. So you can see here that this particular organisation, Boral, read it on the 15th of August at 3:13 p.m. This organisation has not read this quote yet. Fulton Hogan have also read it, and Stabilised Pavements didn't read it, but they would have seen the preview, and they have actually declined to respond. They don't have the resources or don't want to actually partake in that quote. These guys, one of the people within their organisation has declined. That doesn't mean that you're not going to get a response. It means that one of these other colleagues may respond. You can also have here one that comes out with intends to respond, which means you know that they're working on your quote in the background. And if the suppliers have actually responded, like this one for the City of Gold Coast, you have the responses received. So you can see that you've got a quote from that supplier, but you cannot see that response until the quote is actually closed. When the quote has actually closed, if I go down here to one that has closed, you will be able, this organisation will be able to open it up and review and evaluate all of the quotes that have come in. So that just gives you some greater visibility concerning your quotes that you wouldn't have if you were doing this through an email system. The other thing that we do here at Local Buy is that we actually monitor what's going on within the system. And if those suppliers are not reading those quotes, we are contacting the suppliers and encouraging them to read those quotes because that's a business opportunity for that particular organisation. So I'm going to go back up here. And I don't think there's anything else that I need to show you in the system. Now, I am pretty sure that Audrey may have been very busy with some of her the questions and answers. So Audrey's going to come back online in a moment. And the other thing that I would like to say is I'm going to pop up the feedback screen in a moment. But Audrey, do we have any questions?
We do, and I have been answering them. There's a couple we need to take offline. A few people have asked for some assistance with some of our arrangements, so that's really great. ICT and library being super popular.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the question which most people may benefit from, and that is, One from Michelle, who asked, can business stakeholders obtain quotes from local buy suppliers, external of vendor panel, and still refer to local buy contract, which you did cover, but we're having a bit of a conversation about that one. So that was probably the main question. They've been pretty quiet for the amount of people online.
Oh, okay. Maybe that means that we've done a wonderful job of explaining everything.
You just may have there, Em.
So yes, you can absolutely. You do not have to use vendor panel. You can engage a supplier through a purchase order, making sure that you're quoting the local buy pre-qualified supplier contract number. So if you need to find the contract number, I'm going to pop back in here to vendor panel. If you need to find the contract number, I'm going to go back home, go down here to local buy lists, which is under supplier lists. And then they are all at the end here, or you can hover over it. It will give you that LB312. So you'll see on here, and I'll explain this in a little bit more detail, Audrey, if that's okay.
Yep.
If it says LB, that stands for local buy. That is a local buy arrangement that's been local buy is the lead entity that's organised that particular arrangement. Now, those arrangements are open for Northern Territory and Tasmanian councils to access. If you have down here for our heavy plant machinery, that's all of the yellow plant, it says NPN. NPN stands for the National Procurement Network, and that means that all states and territories in Australia are party to that arrangement. So those arrangements are really big manufacturers that are Australia-wide or even global organisations are on those particular arrangements. So if you were going to be buying a piece of heavy plant machinery outside of vendor panel, you would say, I will be engaging you under NPN 2.15-2. It's really important though, if you are engaging outside of vendor panel, you're making sure you're telling those suppliers up front that you will be engaging them under a local buy arrangement. Anything else, Ords?
One's just popped in. If a supplier asks a question, would I receive a prompt to alert me that a question has been asked?
Yes, you will have a prompt and it will come from vendor panel to say that a supplier has asked a question.
Other than that, we have all questions covered.
Wonderful.
Just except the few we will take offline after the session.
Now, if anybody doesn't have now, Audrey, has my screen come back up again yet?
We just have all the people on the screen.
Okay, all right. I'm just going to put the feedback up.
Lynette's asking LBR. That would be our quarry contracts.
Yes.
So LBR, the R is for regional, meaning that the arrangement was made for a regional area and a group of councils.
So here is the feedback form. I'll be very, very grateful for your feedback. Local Buy is really dedicated to improving the education for our buyers and for our suppliers about local buy to make sure everybody knows how it can be beneficial to you if you choose to use it to do your procurement. So we run one of these sessions once a month. This is relatively new. I only started doing these sessions in June, and we have had lots and lots of organisations jump on board to find out more. But our team is always here. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to us. You can you can Teams chat with us. Audrey and I love a Teams chat, or you can send us an email. I will, if it's okay with you, share the slide deck. We do have another one of these sessions scheduled for, I think it's the 19th of September. So if you have any colleagues that you feel would benefit from sitting through this session, or you would like to come again, that's not a problem at all. Feel free to do so. But the reason
Couple of questions, Em.
Oh, yes.
Yep. Danielle's letting us know SurveyMonkey's not allowing us to choose today's session.
Oh,
so
I will send that out, a link to the feedback in the when I send it out to everybody. Sorry about that.
Perfect. And Jessica's asking, can they reach out to us for a more detailed training session on VendorPanel and
Absolutely.
questions?
We are absolutely delighted to assist. So, what we can do, and I have done before, I did for Cairns Regional Council, was do a Cairns Regional Council specific training session. So, if you would like to have one specific to your organisation, we are more than happy to do so. Please just reach out to us. My email address is really easy and it's in the slide deck, epeters@localbuy.net.au. More than happy to help equally with any questions or queries. Do you have
Couple
another
more,
one,
Em.
Audrey? Yep.
Yep. So Paul's asking, can you advise the file size limit for tender submissions being uploaded into VendorPanel?
You can have up to 50. I'm not sure what the total megabytes would be. It's massive though. It's
And
really
it is
big.
asking by tenderers, so with a
By 10.
response.
Oh, the response. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I will have to find out.
Okay.
But
We'll come back to you on that one, Paul.
we do
And
lots of engineering. So if they're putting diagrams and things in there, it's not small. It would be really large. I can't see why it would be any different from when you're going out with diagrams and drawings and things. But I will find out and come back to you.
Okay, and Rebecca's asking, if possible, could I please have a copy of the exact percentage and process that the suppliers pay to local buy?
Absolutely. Yep, that's not a problem at all. Within the information that we send out to you, or Audrey, would you like to talk about it?
Yes. So we are having an information session this afternoon, which will cover part of your question off, Rebecca, and that is the process a supplier goes through to be onboarded onto local buy. The exact percentage they pay is determined by the arrangement that they participate on. So each arrangement will have it in their GCCs that you'll see at the commencement of the tender. So if there's a particular one you're interested in, it is usually between 0.75 and 2%, with 1 and 1.25 being the average. That's the best way to let you know. But if you want to know a particular one, just have a look at the general conditions of contract.
And that's the contractor management fee. Audrey, would you
Yeah.
briefly touch on the administration fees?
So we do have an administration fee, which may be applicable to all suppliers. It is $500 ex GST for the first year and $250 ex GST for each subsequent year. You may be exempt, and that could be if you are a non-for-profit organisation, charitable, sole trader, and an annual revenue of less than 500,000.
So that
And you
means if
need to
you,
be
sorry,
based in Queensland.
and that administration fee is one fee. It doesn't matter how many of the pre-qualified supplier arrangements that you're
Correct.
on, it's just that one fee. We have some organisations who are on 5 or 6 of the pre-qualified supplier arrangements, and in year 2 of their tenure with local buy, they only pay $250.
Perfect. Couple more questions, Em. How can I delete a buyer that no longer is with council but has an open request? They are old and no longer relevant.
That is a wonderful question. That's not a problem at all. We can actually transfer that request for quote across to another user within the vendor panel environment. I've got to do one for someone that has lots of requests for quote that left an organization. And we can't just delete them off because it means all of that information will disappear. You can't do that within the system. We would transfer that person's request for quote to whoever is looking after that role, and it can be quite easily done. If there are lots and lots of them, then we could go and ask vendor panel to do that on our behalf in the background. You can just press click and say transfer these requests for quote to, and then it gives you an option for all of the other users within vendor panel. But if you would like some assistance to do that, I am more than happy to organize a Teams meeting. We can share screens and I can talk you through that process.
Okay, another one here too. Is it possible to shorten the file path of the submissions received, as sometimes we are unable to open the offer as the file path title is too long to open it, and we have to drag the submission onto our desktop to be able to shorten it, the title?
Okay, that's an interesting one. Let's take that one offline. I haven't had that question before. when you download your responses when the quote's actually closed, they download as a zip file. So it could be something to do with that. But I haven't seen a really, really long file name myself. So let's take that one offline, have a look. And if it's something that we need to escalate to VendorPanel in terms of them programming the system, happy to do so.
Okay, and the same lady's asking, could we delete a panel which is already expired or just make it inactive?
Which particular panel?
Is it one of their own or is it a local buy one?
In the system, you can absolutely make a panel inactive. We don't delete any of our panels. We just make them, we deactivate them so they're not available
Oh,
to be seen.
it's on her own panel.
Oh,
On
okay.
her own panel. I'm
Yep.
assuming it's female.
You can absolutely do that. You can deactivate a panel. It won't go away. The information will still sit there, but it won't be viewable for any of your buyers to go in and access. Again, if you would
Perfect.
like some assistance with that, I'm more than happy to help.
And it looks like someone else also has that issue with the file path being so long as well. So
Okay.
definitely need to come back on that one.
Wonderful.
There's a
These questions will actually be saved, so more than happy to come back and address anything that I can't answer right now.
Karen is saying, I get a lot of, and I don't know how to pronounce this word, TRUNCATED files.
Oh, truncated.
Truncated, is that right? What can you do for that one, Emma?
Oh, I don't know. That sounds like a vendor panel issue to me.
Gotcha.
Let's take that one offline. We vendor panel is a technology system that Local Buy uses for issuing our request for quote. So if it's anything that needs to be done in the background, then we're more than happy to
Just
approach
would be
them to
relevant.
that. Yeah.
Sorry. There has been other discussions about those file names as well. So obviously it is
Okay.
something we will need to definitely follow up.
Well, that's awesome feedback for us to have.
Information on local vendors which are not linked to local buy is also, okay, I believe it might mean, is information of local vendors which are not linked to local buy also available?
Within the marketplace, if you are
Yes.
using the upgraded Local Buy technology, you can see those suppliers are not necessarily pre-qualified. If you were going to go and do a search for a supplier, you would see if they were on a Local Buy arrangement or sitting within the marketplace. But apart from the marketplace, we wouldn't have information on non-Local Buy pre-qualified suppliers.
Okay, and just go back to that one. Do you invite suppliers registered on Marketplace to attend the local buy info sessions for suppliers?
Yeah, everybody's welcome to come along. The more the merrier. We had so many people on this webinar this morning. More than happy for any of those suppliers who are interested in coming along to attend those sessions.
Tegan's just popped a question in which, is there a way that our supplier profiles can be cleaned up so that it's easier to identify which profile to invite on Marketplace? We might connect with you offline, Tegan, and have a chat about that question, and just get some more clarity on what you're asking.
Wonderful. Well, thank you
You're
very much.
welcome.
Thank you very much for coming along, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure this morning. It was great to see so many people online. I will put the link into the Matthew's got a question. I will put the link into the email that I'm going to send out to you for the next session. So if you want to come along again, or you have other people who would you feel would benefit from going through this in a bit more detail, please don't hesitate to share that webinar.